Hello, in this video I'm going to show you really quickly the differences um, between translation and copywriting. First of all, any resemblance with actual texts in this video is purely accidental. So let me start with what we have here is the original German text. This is from, let's say, an agency website, agency XYZ, and it's one of the services that they offer. And just the text itself, looking at the text itself, should tell you as a customer whether they're uh, tell you about their approach to this particular service. Um, so they call it intercultural adaptation here. I'm going to just run down the points one by one, and then we'll go through each of the different the translations, and then I'm going to tell you like how long it took and what's the actual difference. Um, First of all, they pick the word intercultural adaptation. The machine translation and the existing human translation, which is from the website also, um, they all use intercultural adaptation. If you look up the term intercultural adaptation, look up more closely. Um, Adaptation. So it actually means like it can probably mean different things in different contexts. First of all, it's a two-way process. Traditional viewpoint is U-curve, so it's kind of a scientific term, but let's say to a general audience it would imply a two-way process. Are we talking about a two-way process here? No, we're talking about adapting a text to a target audience. So the company is adapting to the target audience. The audience is not adapting to the company. So the so that's what we are dealing with here. I'll talk about that later in the proper translation, or as you would say, transcreation nowadays. I don't really like the term that much. Um, so I highlighted some issues in the source text. So there are some um, quality issues in the source text that it is not uh, it's not suitable for the text type, and probably this is advertising copy, but I think it was written by probably a translation expert, um, and it uses this kind of style of German expert language with mismatched word classes. What did that mean? For example, nouns turned into adjectives or verbs turned into nouns and lots of passives. So even in German copywriting nowadays, everybody's going to tell you don't use the passive, right? Use an active voice, and don't speak of your company in third person. Use a we and you kind of voice, like IKEA, for example, right? So this is pretty, I mean, it's not all companies do it, but this is like, I think, basic marketing. Um, so they start here with, so the first term I would like to talk about is treffend. So um, that it, you see it right here, and the other two translations, they translated this term as accurately, appropriately, and here in the fourth one, I just dropped it um, because, actually, when you look at translation theory, there is a term for it. It's called adequacy, functional adequacy. A translation must be functionally adequate. This is really important because it's in all the ISO standards. Um, it's like the paradigm of translation nowadays. So that's what I tried to create here in the last version is a functionally adequate text, which is not equivalent with the source text. It doesn't copy all the terms. You see that? It doesn't reuse all the terms here. It says the same thing, more or less, but in a way that suits the purpose. Then, I mean, this term here, nationalitätsgerecht, you cannot write you cannot talk about nationality, even in political language, and of course not in copywriting. You can't say you're adapting something to a nationality. So nationalism in Germany is not positive language, which you would use in copywriting. Um, then then you have this redundancy here, which is also repeated in all the other translations. Auf Wunsch auch entsprechend ihrer Vorgaben, which literally means like according to your specifications if desired. And entsprechend ihrer Vorgaben is like, first of all, sounds very official, and it sounds like a command is given, even if the command is given by the customer. But this is not this doesn't really create positive associations. Then here we have two issues here with adjectivized nouns. So they want to say they're adapting something to the target group, but they mean the target group, but they turned it into an adjective. They call it target group oriented. We can adapt your specifications in a target group oriented way, is what it literally says, which is even in German not very well written, because you could say es ist an ihre Zielgruppe angepasst. This is kind of lazy officialese writing that you pack everything into compound adjectives or compound nouns. Not very pretty, and in marketing nowadays, you would tend to use a more American style where you use nouns as nouns and verbs as verbs and adjectives as adjectives. You put the subject first. You use an you and I perspective, right? Then also it's using a lot of passives. Werden ihre Texte übersetzt, entsprechend ihrer Vorgaben adaptiert, in Detail mit ihnen besprochen werden. And what this passive here is trying to say, that we the company are going to do this with you. So why didn't you just say it like that? Well, this is also like laziness because it's shorter, but it's actually, if you're not used to reading this kind of writing, it can introduce like a second agent. For example, in this sentence, in der Regel erstellt XYZ hierfür Vorschläge und Varianten. So you have XYZ, this is the company, they're creating variants, die dann im Detail mit ihnen besprochen werden. So this passive introduces another agent, but actually it's the same agent, the agency, which is going to create the text and to talk about them with you. And in most translators, like look at this, the machine translation, XYZ creates proposals and variants of a text for this purpose, which are then discussed with you in detail. They introduce this invisible agent. And the human translation of the website does the same thing, which are then discussed in detail with you, right? So you have two agents here. And here actually in the adapted translation, we say XYZ can create several versions of a text and help you pick the right one. Help you. We can create. We don't usually create. We can create if desired, which is not necessary to say we can create them. That already implies it. And we help you, which is positive language. Could also use something else as long as it's positive. We maybe empower or enable would maybe be too strong, but you catch the drift, right? You need to have some kind of strategy when dealing with these kind of texts and not just rely on the source text, because that can really lead to marketing disasters, or in the worst, or even just useless texts that don't really have an effect. Then here in the last sentence you have here, marktbezogen kann der Text dann im jeweiligen Land. So this is really important. Depending on the market, the text can be tested in the respective country. What is the difference between the market and the country? There is no difference. The market is the country. So what it is saying, we're going to adapt the text to we can test if the text is going to work in that market that you're aiming for. And the market is the country, of course, right? National markets. Um, this is not rocket science. This is not, you don't have to be an economist to know these kind of things. You just have to be able to read properly, to extract meaning and repackage it. This is a translation skill. This is not an expert skill like that you have to study 5 years of economics. Even smart people are going to get this wrong. Um, and that's what you see in the machine translation here, the DeepL post-edited version, and the human translation, which is actually used. Um, look at this, for example. Here they say, depending on the market, the text can be tested in the respective country in order to integrate possible cultural aspects into the adaptation. It's perfectly grammatically correct. Look at this. I post-edited this machine translation, and the yellow highlights are the changes that I actually made. I didn't say your nationality. This was a misunderstanding. Each nationality, in general, they said like usually or something, machine translation, and depending on the market, which also the machine translation, the machine engine didn't understand. But these are the only changes that I made. It took me less than 1 minute to post-edit this machine translation. So really fast, really fast. Probably super cheap. You get it on the market, maybe for a text like this, you pay like 1 cent a word or something because it's obvious. There's like 3 points that you need to change if you're like halfway skilled machine translation post editor, and you can really check the text. There's no grammatical issues in here, but it's not readable. This is not a text you can use. Think about it. This is like just the average, the standard description. Let's say it's one page on your website. It's you don't want to have a lot of text there. People are not going to spend a lot of time reading this. You don't need this much text here, and the original is actually much longer. This is just one part. So you want to keep it as short as possible. You don't want to explain anything complicated. This kind of things, you can do it on your blog, for example. If you have particular issues you want to talk about, you can use that for content marketing. You can explain complicated issues like I'm doing now. You don't do that on your product landing page, no? So also like really, really standard stuff, right? Then we we look at the human translation here. It's not that much different from the machine translation. First of all, we see at first glance it's almost the same length. Let's see how many words. Like it's probably almost the same word count. And then you see all of these issues here. These let's say quality issues in the source text. They are all translated. That's what I highlighted here in blue. Treffend, accurately, appropriately. Nationalitätengerecht, according to each nationality. Actually, the human translator took out the nationality because even they figured it doesn't belong here. They said adapted to your target audience. But they kept all these things like if desired. And here, for this purpose, is also an issue like this is a cohesive device because German eines Textes, die dann, hierfür. So they literally thought, oh, hierfür, it's in the text, so it has to be translated for this purpose. But cohesion works totally different in German than it does in English. In English, no, German, sorry, you need these kind of what are those prepositions, right? You need them to, or pronoun, whatever. These are cohesive devices. It's referring back to something that was said in the previous sentence. In English, because our sentences, if we write properly, they're much more linear. They're subject, verb, object. You do not need these cohesion words. They're like there's a word for it, like grammar words and content words or something like that. This is not a content word. Doesn't need to be translation. It doesn't need to be translated. Then in the last sentence, actually, you can see that the translator didn't really know what was going on. The text can then be proofed again in relation to the market in the relevant country. So they don't understand that the market and the country is the same thing. In order to integrate possible cultural aspects into the adaptation, um, what are possible cultural aspects? There, you have the cultural aspects, they're there. In any case, they didn't understand the main issue. Now, let's look at the transcreation, and this is where the magic happens. And I want to tell you, it took me like 2 minutes because I know what I'm doing. If somebody who knows what they're doing needs maybe I didn't even need 2 minutes, like a little more than, it will take a little longer than a machine translation post editing. But look at all these yellow highlights. These are all SEO relevant keywords. These are all keywords. These are words that people actually use. So we don't say intercultural adaptation in translation language. If a customer wants to buy this kind of thing, we call it transcreation. If we talk about a target audience, we here I included again the cultural adaptation in case in case it has to be in there, in case it's a service that people look for, might be. So, but I didn't call it intercultural adaptation because we're adapting one way, right? Not two ways. XYZ can create, then the next sentence, I made it very short. I didn't have the all if desired, blah, 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 because can already expresses the whole possibility. So XYZ can create several versions of a text and then help you pick the right one. We can create several versions of a text and help you pick the right one. That is what we do. And not, let me look at that. In general, XYZ creates proposals and variants, redundancy, of a text for this purpose, which are then discussed with you in detail. That's not positive language, right? We're not going to start discussing with you. No, we're going to help you pick the right one. And very brief. It's very simple things that are happening here. So why do you need to describe them in a complicated way? We also offer, watch out, another keyword, linguistic and localization testing. Takes a little bit of research, right? But if you look here, localization testing versus linguistic testing, why you need both? So this is a translation agency. So these are kind of two steps in the localization process. And here you can see localization testing. It kind of checks the whole interface. Let's say you're doing software, they make sure that the app or whatever is working properly. Linguistic testing, then they check like that's adequate style, that you don't injure any cultural sensitivities, right? So I just included these two keywords, linguistic and localization testing. I'm assuming that this agency is going to offer them both, right? They can do a review. It's something you got to discuss with the customer. So maybe it's only 1 or 2 minutes of translation, but it's going to involve maybe a half-hour phone call to talk about what their services actually are. To increase cultural acceptance, and instead of saying the text can be proofed again in relation to the market in order to integrate possible cultural aspects. No, we make sure that it's culturally adequate, right? You could also say like improve cultural adequacy, whatever. These are like short words that are used more or less, sometimes interchangeably, but get the point across. And then the last subclause, I put it into how do you call them? I put them into brackets because because this is kind of a redundant. This is also a redundant statement. Kann der Text im jeweiligen Land noch geprüft werden, um mögliche kulturelle Aspekte bei der Adaption zu integrieren? And they translated that depending on the text, the market, the text can then be tested in the respective country in order to integrate possible cultural aspects into the adaptation. I kind of rewrote that whole thing. But the important thing is here, I want to have the keywords, right? And I don't, look at this, it's maybe like half of it is maybe white space, but the rest is keyword. At least half of it is keywords. That's what I want. We also offer linguistic and localization testing to increase cultural acceptance and make sure your texts engage your customers. That's like kind of another promise, but it's a logical consequence, I guess, of having a culturally adequate text. So you might not need to put it in there. You could even make it shorter, right? Because remember, writing for the web is writing for skimming. Nobody's going to spend a lot of time philosophizing about your text. So if they're this long, they're not going to get what the hell you're offering. So short text like this, maybe a couple of images, and that should do the trick. Right. Yeah, so this is the whole difference, right? This is shows you the quality levels in translation. Human translation. Translation like that is going to cost you, I don't know, 10 to 15 cents. It's correct, maybe more or less, right? Grammatically correct, maybe internally coherent, maybe accurate, like maybe equivalent with the source text, but does it work? No. So you look at these once more, judge for yourself. I can upload the file for you to review, and then I think this should answer a lot of questions. And a proper translation like this is not something you can just charge by the word. You have to kind of make a package because it takes some research, some discussion with the customer. So thanks a lot for watching, and if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below.